I'm the webmaster and an archivist for the Leas Pavilion archive. I'm going to tell you about how we organise our content. Hopefully you might learn some do's and even some don'ts from what we do and what we've done. The Leas Pavilion was built in 1902 as a tea room. It then became a theatre in 1928, for a long time run by Arthur Bruff, who went on to Are You Being Served on television. It then became a pub, sort of a sports bar pub, in the 80s, and by 2008, they were looking at other solutions. They wanted to redevelop and build on top of it. You can see from the old black and white photo there, it's sunk down into the cliff so that the hotels around it had a sea view. The hotels have disappeared and they wanted to redevelop. There was quite a bit of community concern about that. We had the building listed, the project stalled, and unfortunately the venue closed in 2010. So the Friends of Leas Pavilion was set up in 2015 after the venue had sat empty in order to hopefully try and keep the building going and resurrect it. 2 carrier bags full of materials from the theatre days were donated. They're things like programmes and newspaper clippings, that sort of thing. So it was decided to start an archive. They went for funding and fortunately was successful. A memory cafe was held. You see photos here. It was a great opportunity to get memories, record them. And I went along, I hadn't been involved until this point. I took photos and I offered some assistance because I have a background in web hosting, archiving, and as a local historian. So they wanted an online archive. So we had to look at, well, how do you do that? You could have a custom design, which would be exactly what you want. Unfortunately, that would probably be very expensive. Or you could use existing collections management systems. And we found a nice selection on the Collections Trust website. There's a good list there. This would be industry standard vocabulary, but there are some downsides. Often it's an offline system. You need a plug-in to go online. That can become quite expensive. And also, you can find that it's a bit boring and technical. So what's the back end like? How user-friendly is it going to be for our volunteers? So we spoke with the Folkestone Library and we spoke with the Kent Archives, and they recommended that we speak to St Margaret's Village History website. We're very impressed with their website and we arranged a visit, and they had a personal extensive collection donated that became their archive. So they showed us their processes for scanning and uploading the materials. And they told us that their website was set up by community sites. So we got hold of the organiser, Jack Latimer, who runs community sites, and we're pleasantly surprised to find, despite him coming down personally and giving us training, he would be the cheapest option, by quite some margin. He also told us that he runs the Community Archives and Heritage Group. If you haven't seen it, do visit their website. You're able to add your own archive to the map of archives for free. And there's a lovely resource tab there, which has stuff such as guidance for community archives in cataloguing. We found this very useful, and I understand that the toolkit will probably end up in the resources section there. Jack's quite excited about it today, but unfortunately couldn't be here. So before I started, they had an action plan, which looks quite daunting, but actually we can drill this down to repetitive elements. First of all, you need funding. You can't do much without funding. Secondly, volunteers. Find your volunteers, and you can see that's repeated across the board there. Then they had to seek professional advice. Without any kind of one-stop shop, no toolkit, we had to speak to a lot of people. And also, we then needed to find software, hardware, come up with our own guidelines and all that sort of thing. So when we were looking for doing extensive research into what we needed, we came across a number of questions, and some of them were quite technical, and perhaps a lot of us didn't understand them really. So, for example, top down or bottom up. That's something you really can't find a basic, what does this mean to? Most archives, of course, top down. but there may be a case for bottom lines. I said G or Dublin Core. Personal preference. Dublin Core, of course, was 15 descriptors, which we lent towards Dublin Core. How's the data going to be accessed? Do you want a search on your website? How good is the search going to be? Or do you want some sort of categories that you click on and it's more hierarchical? What fields need keyword lists? What we needed to consider was we don't do things by halves. We didn't just want an online catalogue. You can see past productions, we wanted a performance list. And our performance list would have links to any catalogue items. A programme would have a link to the performance and such. This was quite daunting, but Jack took it in stride and said, yeah, we can do that. Catalogue fields, you can see are very much based on Dublin Core. You can see in their format list, we'll talk about in a minute. But the performance fields for the performance list are a bit more customised. So we find that with a lot of people, we had 12 volunteers. When they're entering data, it tends to become a bit fragmented. It looks like a lot of people have entered that data. So we developed a house style to ensure a more uniform approach. This looked at things like punctuation, capitalisation, but Jack also pointed out to us that dates needed to be specific, otherwise you're going to have funny things happen. So for example here, 1920 to 1937 should not be written as 1920 to 37. We learned the hard way that when you do make mistakes, weird things happen and you get weird dates coming up on your websites, unfortunately. So the items in our archive are in a number of formats. You've got newspapers, posters, photos, programmes, and even cuttings from our modern campaigns of trying to save the building. So we came up with a list of formats. I think we did this before at the beginning, thinking about everything we had and had seen, but you could do this as you go along. And then we came up with a folder structure, which is simple, 3 letters, BRO, brochure, LEA, leaflet, PRO, programme. And you can see that we haven't populated empty folders on our hard drive there. You can if you want, but that's how we decided to do it, to be simple. So we went around and looked at other naming conventions. Here's Folkestone Library's photo archive. You can see that they've used F for Folkestone, ENT for entertainment, SOC for society, and a number. You can also see that the subject description, in some cases, where I put brackets, were empty. So I had to look at the published field, the feature field, in order to find out what on earth this photograph was. That's not very helpful, and so we had to create guidance for our volunteers. These fields must be populated, and also with the description, how to populate it. We didn't want anything too short, too long, we wanted it to be uniform. Also, Kent County Council has Kent Archives, which is up in Maidstone, it's quite away from us, and they had some items. Now, they use more of a hierarchy system, which is a bit confusing because you have to kind of click through to find any information. You can see here, these 3 records don't really tell us anything. Leas Pavilion, what's that? F1966/9/BC12/14 record. What does that mean? Let's have a look. It's one document. We don't know what the document is, unfortunately, but we can see that /9 is solicitors' records, /B is business records, BC is client papers, BC12 is memoranda, and /14 is to the Leas Pavilion. It's all rather confusing. You can see it's here again, subfonds that use 1, 2, 3, 4. If you look at the actual record number, you don't tell much. You really need to look at the hierarchy, and that really becomes overwhelming, as we can see here. So for our hierarchy, we found it must be self-explanatory. It also needs sufficient identification, but we also need to be able to add new items. And it must be a manageable folder system. So what we came up with is this. Now, hopefully this is self-explanatory. The archive ID is us, LP. The format is that 3-letter code we've seen before. Year, and if we don't have a year, we actually put year. And then likewise, month, and if we don't have a month, we put MOM. And then the record number. So this record is for a programme from 1956, May, and there it is. As for our folders, you can see that the folder structure is exactly the same for LP Pro 1956, May. And you will also see that some of the files have _1, _2, _3, that's just the page that we've scanned. So we work with other organisations in scanning. Now, East Kent College scanned our own art collection for us. And here's that programme again. I think we maybe made a mistake because May 1 is the first scan, _1 is page 2, _2 is page 3. It should probably just have _1 is page 1 and so on. But it doesn't really matter as long as we know what's going on in the background. Kent Archives have a big collection, well, in fact, it was the Folkestone Library collection. And here we see a programme that was actually just 2 performances before our programme that we had. We can't put this in chronological order, we've already done this one. So I would go May _2 to show it's the second item in May of that year. They went for something completely different. And you will also notice it's nothing like Folkestone Library's numbering for their photos. University of Kent went very simple, the name of the play and the page number. Unfortunately, that play may have been repeated in other years, so that's not very useful. And then a local historian, you often see this with local historians, a very complex file name, which is quite useful, but actually when you're working with databases, when you're working with online storage, all those full stops and spaces and things tend to be, I would avoid them if I were you personally. So here we have our back end. You can see it's fairly easy to enter. Just a text box here, and then you've got things to tick, and even here it tells you not to tick things. Fortunately, Jack came down and trained our volunteers, and they were all quite okay with using this. And you can see down here that the way the catalogue and performance lists link up, we just have a search bar, and you can choose, and again, there we have different performances of the same play in different years, and you can add multiple performances if you need to. So, our front end, the main way that people can access our archive is through our website. And you will see on our website, here is an example of search, and here is an example record. And you can click through and there will be a PDF of that. And here we can see all that stuff in action with the linking between the catalogue and the performance. So Derek Snoop was director on 12 plays. If we clicked on Derek Snoop's name, we would see all those 12 plays. And the interesting thing here, we can see that Elizabeth Adman was the wife of Arthur Brough. Now, she was a playwright and she wrote this play, and she specifically changed this play for this production. And in this production, you have June Brown, who then went on to be Dot Cotton in EastEnders. So, with our naming conventions, the file structure, and a WordPress-based website, we can much more easily achieve our main goal of archiving the building's past. Though we have had the opportunity of documenting and archiving its recent present, and we will have opportunities for archiving its future. We get to help people recall fond memories and document sometimes contentious evolution. Thank you very much.